Hello, welcome to the Struggle Bus. My name is Nolafis, and today I'm excited. We've got the start of a new series. It's going to be going over Trackmania, all its different styles, but specifically how to build it. Because there are some styles that are, we'll say maybe not the friendliest to start out with. And this first episode, we're going to be talking about tech, but I will say I am not an expert when it comes to every single Trackmania style. So to help me out, I'm going to bring on some special guests from the community. And today, to help talk about tech, I've got Whizzy. Whizzy, do you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. Hello, hello.
All right, and I'm excited for this. Yeah, I think it's going to be I think it's going to be helpful for a lot of people because one thing that I did want to say about tech, maybe like right before we get started, I think tech is one of the styles that you can help and, well, I guess carry over into almost any other style.
Yeah, for sure. I would say there's a lot of it's quite a good sort of starting ground. So, almost like it's really good building blocks. For instance, it really helps with building the foundations of your mapping skills. I guess you could say. So, yeah, it's a really good surface or style to kind of start out with.
Yeah, so that's definitely why I wanted it to be the subject of episode one. But before we get too into tech, Wizzy, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself? How long have you been mapping? All that, good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm Whizzy. So, I do mapping, and also I do like I'm a semi-professional player with wilds, but also a little bit of skinning. So a little bit of everything in Trackmania.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just in terms of the mapping side of things, I used to play Trackmania Nations way back when I was in school. So that's kind of where my desire, passion for the game, and also the sort of the creativity side of the game, uh, sort of sort of sprouted, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so technically, I started mapping then, but I came back to Trackmania in when 2020 was released, and yeah, I again I picked up mapping straight away. I was just really hooked into it. Um, I then looked to I've always looked to to the high end of mapping, especially on the competitive scene. That was a quite a core source for kind of my I guess you could say idols, but like people who I look up to in terms of
Yeah.
the mappers
Mm-hmm.
and the maps they create. I'm like, oh, it's so cool. So you know, I really wanted to improve, and yeah, so I looked to join the what isn't anymore, but it used to be the Waypoint Academy. In I think it was by early 22 or so. I'm actually not sure, but
Around there.
something around then, yeah. And then honestly, to my surprise, I got in. I wasn't entirely convinced, to be honest. But I managed to get in, which was a really a pretty crazy day, to be honest. I remember I just finished work, and Kiesler sent me that message. I was quite taken aback. So I did stop off and buy myself like a nice carton of chocolate milk or something to celebrate it. But yeah, so I've been with Waypoint since then, um, doing group projects with them, but also many individual projects for mostly competitive mapping predominantly.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also done kind of fun things on the side as well. Yeah, that's a little bit of the history, I guess you could say. Yeah,
Yeah, so especially getting into Waypoint, that's very impressive.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's again, I'll kind of reiterate, and to be honest, not just Waypoint, but any mapping team, is it's a real good to strive to get into a community or a team which
Mm-hmm.
can help you there, therefore improve more. is a great goal to have because that's what pushed me to improve my mapping and and to continue to improve my mapping because I'm now seeing others wanting to join and therefore they're improving. Then I'm looking at their maps and going, that's maybe I could take a little bit of that,
Mm-hmm.
So it's yeah, I would really recommend people if you want to try and um, increase or improve your mapping, and yeah, for sure, look into what teams are available. Just to mention like a couple, Horizon, a Waypoint. You've got, but there's loads of teams out there who are really really good and really supportive. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just finding any sort of just little community to help just bounce ideas off, help keep you motivated, giving input on each other's projects, all that good stuff. Like that helps so much.
for sure, yeah.
All right. So, let's see. Going here, I know we're going to talk about tech, but as far as because mapping covers quite a few things. Is there anything in specific you feel like you specialize in?
Um, so I would say it's excuse me. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a style, but it's more a branch, I guess you could say, which is that kind of competitive aspect of things.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say competitive, like it's fair enough. It's a bit of a weird name for it because there isn't really it's not really a style in essence.
Yeah.
But instead, I at least for me, I would think that it's kind of encompasses the difficulty aspects, uh, uh, those sort of things into one, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, so I generally focus on mapping for competitions. Um, but in terms of styles, I don't really have a particular one. I don't think which I specialize in. I'm kind of a jack of all trades to an extent, of course.
Yeah.
But I try to be, but I think that's kind of what I aimed for because especially with competitive being predominantly mixed most of the time,
Mm-hmm.
it's quite good to have a wide repertoire to be able to use different elements as to be creative and to include different surfaces and styles and such where you can. So
Yeah, I think yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And honestly, competitive, I think that's gonna have to be its own episode in the future. It is interesting because it's not just like you said, it's not just one thing. It's more of like
yeah,
the idea or the difficulty, I guess.
yeah,
And
for sure.
I think that would be interesting to explore. But I'm sorry, that's not what I have you here today. So
Therefore,
yeah, for now, we're gonna go ahead and start talking about tech. So, well, I guess first of all, for maybe someone who's really new to the game, what is tech?
yeah. So tech in in its simplest form is basically you drive on just road. Think of it as that.
Mm-hmm.
But what's specific to why it's called tech instead of another style is you purposely drift into corners.
Mm-hmm.
More or less. That's so yeah. Basically, tech is you drive on road, and it's all about drifting and hitting those apexes and using platform or road to create the corners, uh, to induce to force the player to drift through the corners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much what tech is, but d despite that, because I mean that's a very simple definition. I mean, it's basically just drifting over and over again. There's quite a few different styles or branches that you can go off with tech. Because off the top of my head, there's regular tech, which you think in typically Gear 4. I guess Gear 5, you would go with speed tech if you
Yeah,
start to get really fast, or this one doesn't really have a name, but it's where you start off on either like plastic, grass, or something. You start to turn, so you start to slide on that, and then you transfer that to that platform or road, and then that's kind of
yeah.
how you start the drift.
Yeah.
I had mentioned that in a video, and someone in one of my comment section said we should start calling it Autotech. I'm like, honestly, that's not a bad name. So I've been using that
Mhm.
term ever since, but I don't
Yeah.
think the wider community knows what that
Yeah.
is. But you know what I mean with Autotech?
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of auto slide or like auto sliding. So as you say,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, using the different surfaces to induce the slide already instead of needing to brake, basically.
Yeah, but I've seen people argue with whether or not that should even be considered close to tech. What do you think about that?
Mm, I think, I mean, it's tricky because you are still sliding through the corner. You are still drifting through the
Mm-hmm.
corner. Um, if it was like NASCAR, as just an example, where it is very clear that you for the most case you don't drift. You instead release through the corners to preserve the speed.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think yeah, that's kind of fair enough. Then that is very very different. Um, I think yeah, my argument would be that yeah, you're still sliding. The fact that you don't brake, I don't think I think that's um disproportionate to the fact that you're still sliding through the corner. So um, I would argue that it's tech, I guess.
Yeah, I
Um,
guess like at the very least, the idea is related to it's related
yeah,
to tech. Maybe not like immediate relation, but like relative. It could be a
yeah,
cousin or something.
yeah. Step siblings, something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
uh-huh, uh-huh. All right, but let's see. So the big thing with tech though is I think throughout Trackmania's history, it is it's kind of been the style of Trackmania almost forever, like almost ever since its inception. I think it's kind of been like one of the most, well, I say the most iconic style from this game. What do you agree with that? Saying that tech is the most iconic style?
So I would say there's probably two.
Okay.
There's two. I would say there's two styles which probably if you were to say to someone, describe Trackmania to me, then I would guess they would probably like if they were to just type a video in, like just Trackmania into YouTube
Mm-hmm.
or Google or any search engine or anything, they will probably find these two styles, which is tech and I don't know if this is kind of a style, but I'm just gonna say it's like Zerator-ish style.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not really a
Mm-hmm.
style, but you can kind of
Almost that
like
like lol speed fun kind of thing.
it's kind of just I don't know how you describe I
I
don't know
honestly
how you
don't know
describe
how.
like, but it's just completely random. LOL stunts, wicked stuff.
Chaos.
Anything that shouldn't work traditionally shouldn't work, but that's what makes that style so unique. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess
Um,
maybe tech is like the most iconic uh competitive. Not that
yeah,
Zerator's not competitive, but meant to be competitive, meant to be taken seriously.
yeah,
Uh
I think that's fair enough. Yeah.
yeah, okay. Okay. Cuz I mean, it's been around. I think well, I think if we take a look at the highest levels now and we see a bunch of mixed like you said competitive mixed coming from earlier, that's actually relatively new. And in
Yeah,
the previous games and even in the start of 2020, almost every single competitive map was tech or included some form of tech
yeah.
throughout the route. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's tech over like any other style?
I think well in the older games that was the only surface was road.
Mhm.
You did of course have stadium grass, but what- that was kind of used to initiate sort of auto sliding or used to initiate the actual drifts.
Mhm. And I
Uh,
mean it was
so
flat too, so can't really do too
yeah,
much with
yeah.
that.
And then later on they added dirt. But they kind it was it's sort of like, think of it as like, to an extent, full speed competitive and like mixed competitive or something, or even competitive dirt now. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
was very much separate. Like, you had its own separate competitions and such. Um, I think I admit I didn't play TM2, so I'm not I didn't really have a massive gauge on that, but at least that's what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the so in terms of why kind of from ESWC to TM2, it was predominantly always tech. Because I guess that's the only thing they could play really. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, of course, you had full speed and dirt, but again, it was very much separate. So, and I guess tech was more, it probably just looked more competitive. Maybe, I don't know, to be honest, but it's a good question. But
I mean,
in
I
terms of sorry.
oh no, I was just gonna say because I mean, like you said, there was still full speed because full speed has been around just as long as tech has. But
Hmm,
I guess if you fall behind on a full speed map, then there's a lot less opportunity to come back because with tech it's just with every single corner is a test. And I guess with full speed there's like speed sliding and making sure you hit all that stuff, but there's like I feel like tech gets a lot more in your face of
mhm.
just here's a test, can you pass the test, can great you did that, now can you pass this test, with each drift being its own little separate test. So it could be that it's just like there's a lot of opportunities for coming back into the game. Person up front
Yeah.
messes up one corner, and all of a sudden it's super tight. All that stuff.
Yeah, and I think another point would be that with full speed is it's not about hitting the apexes necessarily. It's
Mm-hmm.
instead, taking the right lines and getting those overlaps correct and such, and the transitions and everything. Um, Whereas, yeah, with tech, you could just see when someone is pushing. You could see that, um, if they do little to no correction and they just kiss the or you know, just or shy away from the barrier,
Mm-hmm.
that it's visually much clearer, and therefore probably clearer to the general audience, that it's like, okay, this, that was impressive.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
they're gonna gain time.
yeah, it's a lot more spectator friendly.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. But looking, I guess, at like tech, or specifically tech maps, what what makes it good? It's like
In
there's
terms
a
in terms of like the what makes a map good, or like
yeah, so a tech map, because obviously you've got a bunch of people building tech maps, given that it is, I don't know if it's Trackmania's most popular style anymore, but it's still one of.
yeah,
And so when you're, I guess, like playing a map, like what makes you think that like, oh, this is a good tech map versus
yeah.
something that you might see in map review under the title First Map '01 or
Mhm.
something.
Yeah, gotcha. So I guess there's a few things which I can highlight, which you might hear the term being kind of thrown around all the time, but it is a very, very important thing, which is flow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, flow, like, what does that mean? I'm basically, um, think of it as though, or at least I try to think of it as almost like a pendulum,
Mm-hmm.
where it's, instead of um being disrupted, it's in a consistent state, and it's not needing to be disrupted by anything. It's just flowing. It's just in its own trance, I guess you could say. So relating that back to, what on earth is flow? Um, I guess try to describe it is, if you were to drive the track, um, in an optimal scenario, you would be just gliding through the track, just one input, or maybe a few corrections, but in general, kind of just you wouldn't need to do massive harsh braking, or you wouldn't finish a corner and then have a really really tight one right after it. That's
Mm-hmm.
just an example. You know that. So whereas instead, I guess a good tech map would, uh, I guess I see this quite a lot as well. Is you could have the corner profiles themselves could be good, could be creative and innovative,
Mm-hmm.
but what a lot of time happens is, they'll have, let's say you exit the corner, exit a left-hander, and then you'll be thrown into a right-hander, like straight afterwards, after the left-hander,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine, but it feels quite claustrophobic to play because I'm having to make really sharp inputs and probably even a neo slide to get it to get around. I'm not working with the track. I'm kind of fighting it instead.
Yeah, yeah, I've definitely said that before.
Yeah. So that's kind of one aspect, I guess. Um, I suppose another slightly, it's still an important aspect, but it's slightly less needed, I guess, is in terms of the gears and such.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a little more tricky, like the kind of the calculation and such, but um, in terms of calculating corners and trying to create corners where you have a clean gear shift
Mm-hmm.
in before the corner. So a lot again, sometimes you see it on track of the days, or just general tracks where you could have some of the fastest players. They'll come in, they'll enter the corner like max revs, right, flirting with that gear, really
Mm-hmm.
really close to the gear. Um, which is like, it does feel good because all of a sudden you could be hit with going gear 4 to gear 5 whilst you're braking or whilst you're drifting, and it's just all, so trying to avoid that,
Feels so bad.
by yeah. So trying to avoid that is quite important, and just tying that back, tying that back into my previous point. Um, a good map won't be afraid to use, even if it's just some small chicanes where you don't even drift, you just, it's more of a just a slalom. But that gives time for the car to gear up, or get the proper entry, or you know, get the
Mm-hmm.
player prepared for that next corner. It
Yeah.
won't be afraid to use those kind of elements. Um, Whereas sometimes you might have a slightly newer mapper, or such. They'll have these really cool ideas. So they'll get those into the map, but they'll be lacking a bit in the general setup. So it will feel, like I say, quite claustrophobic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think because I've done a video on flow, and my biggest challenge with that video was just trying to define it because it's such like
Yeah,
it's an abstract concept. So the way so what I landed on was that the exit of a turn or an element should driving that optimally, it should lead you very nicely into setting up for the next element or turn or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah, because
mhm,
it yeah, because especially I like your example of that like nice left hand drift into that sharp right corner. Is it's just it you don't get any time to set up for it. It's just there. And
yeah,
like you said, you're fighting the map now instead of like driving with it.
mhm,
I
yeah,
think I
yeah,
think yeah, and I think that's really like if you can get into the flow of a good tech map, like honestly, it's really nice to drive. It feels
mhm,
good.
yeah. Especially if you put that a little bit of time into to training it, and then you get to the point where it's just steer or one input release, and you just kiss the apex. Yeah, it feels really good to drive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why tech has kind of endured as a style. Is just it is punishing because obviously you can hit the wall on any one of these corners, or if you overdrift, you lose speed, and you gotta wait till the next corner to try to make it back or anything. But at the same time, it feels very fair, I guess. Like it's your skill determining like how good you are with the map. It doesn't feel like a gimmick or anything.
Yeah,
Yeah. So but I guess talking about good tech maps is one thing, but then like actually building tech is something completely different, because I remember my first few attempts at building tech. My very first attempt, I was, like you said before, I was new. I had a wild idea, and you know what? I was going to execute it. It was going to be great. And so I built the map, and then I sent it off for testing, and I got the feedback that the map was literally unplayable. And and so for a while I just didn't touch tech. I was like, you know what, maybe tech's not for me. But
yeah,
obviously adding it to your wheelhouse and stuff I think is really important. But what are your, I guess, like, first thoughts on mapping tech? Like, how did you start out with it? What are some difficulties, all that good stuff?
yeah. So I guess I remember first sort of. So I remember the first maps which I mapped in 2020 was ice. Um, and then I started going into different tracks
Mm-hmm.
or styles. And so I remember the first sort of proper focused tech map. It was actually a sausage tech map. Um, so the again using road, but the kind of the raised ones instead
Mm-hmm.
of the flat ones, basically.
Yeah.
Um, so it was actually for the Christmas calendar project,
Okay.
21, I think it was. Must have been, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I think I was I don't know. Anyway, um, and yeah, so I was, yeah, got this really cool idea. And it's in terms of wanting to create tech. A lot of it is trying to come up with some of the ideas of corner profiles first, at least for
Mm-hmm.
me. Um, which is the same thing I do now, to be honest. Like if I just have a random idea, like even if I would finish a track, I will just I will just create the sector or the section or something just to
Mm-hmm.
get it on paper, And even then, I could just save the macro block um to use later, Um, but in terms of in general, if I were to start mapping tech, it's a, a kind of the first yeah the first thing is, okay, how what level of difficulty do I want to make this? Do I am I and this goes for a lot of maps as well, not necessarily tech,
Mm-hmm.
as but in general, um, yeah, what kind of difficulty do I want to aim for? Um, so for instance, do I want to make it a bit more, you know, for the majority of players, so sort of track of the day sort of level. In which case you'll probably be looking into smooth gear 4,
Mm-hmm.
consistent gear 4. Whereas, yeah, if I want to add a bit more difficulty in there, then I will try to think of a few corners which could induce a gear down, so going into gear 3, adding a bit more challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're kind of a couple of just the general thoughts which kind of go through my head, I guess. Um, when deciding to create tech.
Yeah, because I think Um, my biggest difficulty I had when I first started mapping tech was I wasn't thinking about each turn as its own individual element. I was more thinking
Mm,
about like this combination of three turns. So I
okay,
was
yeah.
yeah, so I guess going back to like flow a little bit. Like so for the first drift, you would have to take a little suboptimally to then get out, to then take, I guess, like the second or third turns properly. But it
Yeah.
took me a while to figure out that that upset people. that's not
Mhm.
that's not what they looked for. What they looked for is every single turn is its own element, and um, for some reason it took me a while to figure that out. I kept thinking that like, oh, it'd be cool if you had to take this one improperly because now it's like a puzzle and that'll really differentiate the people who are paying attention. But no, people got upset. They didn't like it very much.
Yeah.
So, so for me that was kind of like the big difficulty of getting over tech was just really thinking about each separate piece. It wasn't just like how yeah, it wasn't just like like how I guess they well it was about how they fit together. I don't know where I'm going with this. I lost my train of thought. Anyway, so
No, I get what I get what you mean though, kind of.
yeah. So
So yeah.
with this though, like how so you said controlling difficulty and like keeping smooth gear 4 and everything like that. So I will say every Wednesday, I do a stream on viewer map review and everything, and I've gotten quite a few maps that people have said like it's their first attempt at tech,
Okay,
and
yeah.
honestly, they are the hardest maps that people submit in. They are so hard. So like, so what are some things that you do to control the difficulty? Because obviously they're staying within
Mm,
gear 4, like you said, or staying within a gear. Doesn't have to be 4. But what are some other things that you would say that like if you get the feedback like, oh, this turn might be too hard? Well,
mhm.
what are some things you would do?
So a couple of things, which I'll look to. The first being how much space does the player have? So, or how tight is the entry or the corner or such like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, I was reviewing a track, I think a couple of days ago, and you had to get such a specific line in order to even have an attempt at the next corner.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, well it doesn't feel it feels quite difficult, but even then it doesn't feel satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
So again, if I were to reduce the difficulty, I suggested to um make it a bit more lenient. So adding a little bit more space, so it's a bit more flexible as to what player wants to do and what line they want to take.
Mm-hmm.
And then also again the entry. So one thing which um can make tech a lot more difficult is needing to avoid no slides. So no slides is when you try to drift. Um, if you're too slow or if you're at a certain angle or the profile of the corner isn't quite right,
Mm-hmm.
then the rear tires just won't brake and the car will just go oh, and it will just not slide at all. Um, and quite a lot of the time, um, difficult, yeah, difficult maps, which which don't include the gears or anything, do feature. At least I found that they do feature some of these aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Is areas potential areas where people could no slide, which the that results in people potentially needing to take a small jump before the drift itself to induce the slide, or to neo slide, which is a very very difficult technique in itself. So it's not easy for majority of players.
Yeah, I
Um,
would not include that in a track of the day style map.
yeah. So I think um yeah, trying to well the points which I mentioned earlier will generally help um with preventing these no slides happening. Um, Another way which can help as well is, so sometimes I see this where you'll have a drift to the left, and then the next corner is also a drift to the left.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which again is okay, but the reason why I say it in that tone is because again it's a no slide potential, because as soon as you finish drifting and the car kind of straightens out again, you get 4 skid marks on the tires.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you try to drift again, the no slide happens. So you end up having to release the steering and then go back into the corner
Mm-hmm.
to steer left again, which is again, it's okay if you map it in a certain way. But if you give enough time for the player to release the steering and then get back into the slide,
Mm-hmm.
it's not actually that too bad. But it's when it's really close together that you have to, like, release the steering and then go again, and then you have to, you have to neo slide to save it, or,
Yeah,
so yeah.
little awkward.
Yeah, yeah. So, that's another example of difficulty, but not necessarily with the gears or anything. Um, and that again, giving a bit more time to set up, giving a bit more space for people to prepare
Mm-hmm.
will really help.
Yeah, and I think too, so with the map review room, the one with 3 minutes per map, not
Yeah,
the best for receiving like overall feedback on your map, but if you are concerned about difficulty, it is a great place to go in and just get first impressions. Like,
yeah,
are
yeah.
are people even able to get to the end, or is this too difficult? Can they get somewhat of a clean run or something? And
For sure.
yeah, so I think that would be another way on how to test difficulty, and then obviously getting uh, feedback from specific players that maybe you can ask, especially if you're on a mapping team. You got you got that baked in, got some play
Mm,
testers. Um,
yeah.
but
I
yeah,
think especially if, like, if you're especially if you're aiming for a certain demographic, then map review does have its strengths 100%,
mm-hmm,
because especially if you were to go into camera 7, or if you go to spectate, where you can see all the players, you can kind of see where the players are failing most often,
mm-hmm,
and then you can take action accordingly. So, is there a speed check which is a little bit too punishing, or is there a bit of CD which is a bit too blind, so
mm-hmm.
players don't know where to go, or it's just examples like that.
Yeah, and especially if you see someone who maybe gets like a pretty good discovery time or whatever, and you watch them again, and you maybe notice like, oh, despite them having a pretty good discovery time, like they keep crashing this one corner over and over and over again. Maybe I need to take a look at that one corner. Maybe it's like a break of flow, or
Yeah,
scenery makes it blind or whatever. So I think definitely watching other people. Stop playing your own maps and map review. Watch other people, especially if you want feedback.
yeah,
It's
100%.
okay. You don't have to get first on the leaderboard on your own map. It's fine. The room will move on anyway. I promise. Uh, Yeah, so going off of like the difficulty is I guess like the checkpoint placements is especially in TM 2020, checkpoints are a really good tool to practice certain parts of a map, especially
Yeah.
with like the flying respawns and everything like that. But I've noticed in quite a few tech maps, people like to place checkpoints in the middle of a drift,
Mhm.
and I don't like that. It's like like where do you place checkpoints? Where do you try to put them?
So I, where possible, it obviously depends because sometimes you'll just have to, make lemonade out of lemons, and
Yeah.
just
Mhm.
like you will just have to place a checkpoint in an awkward place to prevent cuts or such.
Mhm.
Um, but where possible, I try to place checkpoint before the initiation of a drift, so
Mhm.
before braking, because again that allows people to respawn and go, okay, I need to brake a little bit later or make that adjustment. Because as you said, like if you have the checkpoint already like whilst you're drifting, it's much harder to make that correction.
Mhm.
Which is not only frustrating for people just generally playing the map, or not only during rounds in Cup of the Day, but also during Track of the Day. Like if they were on a really really good run, let's just say world record or anything, any good run, any PB or any improvement,
Mhm.
and they crash, they want that opportunity. I think this is as well with especially with competitive maps, because it's just a slight tangent with competitive maps.
Mhm.
Um, I think there's obviously a very understandable. There's a very good focus on it needs to be rounds viable. Yes, it does, but
Mhm.
also we need to think about training and also and playing the map and time attack. If the checkpoint placement is in such a way that you, let's say you want a copium timer, which is, if you basically it's a plugin which allows you to respawn, but you can still see what your time would have been. So it's a really
Mhm.
good tool,
Yeah, I
really good
love it.
plugin. Um, let's say you wanted that copium time. Depending on the checkpoint placement, if you can't make that perfect correction, it's very infuriating. So I try to keep that in mind as well. So going back to the actual placement of the checkpoint, yeah, in general, I try to do it either like just before or before the initiation of the drift, to give again that time and that space for players to make that fine adjustment, or also um on the, well, you can do on the exit of a drift 100%.
Mhm.
I try to police the checkpoint after you've finished the curvature of the corner.
Yeah.
So you've done the turning and you've, let's say, you've gone nice and close to that outside wall. Then you can think about placing a checkpoint, because I'll just place another scenario in your head, which is you've just absolutely washed out really good corner, really good turn,
Mhm.
and you've kissed that apex and you're going really close to that wall, but you're not sure if you should release or not. But you keep your foot in because you're determined to get that lap time in your
You got
PB.
this. You got this.
Yeah, yeah. So you send it, um, and you just pixel clip, literally painful feeling.
Mhm.
If you had that checkpoint right on, right where you hit the wall, that is so infuriating, because that again, the player doesn't have the opportunity to redo that corner and do it and go again. They're just
Mhm.
stuck, and it's like, oh. So yeah, I try to do it either, yeah, sum up. I try to do it, yeah, before a corner, before the initiation of a drift. If I have to, I will do it uh after, or sorry, during a drift. I will try to do it just after the apex. So they could release if they wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
or at the exit of a corner after they finish doing all of the turning.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Just definitely not in the middle of the setup, or like
Yeah.
right after you, like the point which you have to commit for it.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think those are the worst spots. Uh, where do you start thinking about double respawns?
Hmm.
It's obvious
Um.
double respawns, like you hit the respawn twice and it pops you off on the side on a booster or something to get you immediately back
Mm,
into play. So,
yeah. I think at least with tech, I tend to not worry about it too much.
mm-hmm,
In general, tech doesn't have too many like speed checks or anything like that. Um, but it's also not like full speed where you kind of have to have like 500, 600, or upwards of that speed to be able to clear the elements.
mm-hmm.
Fortunately, you don't need that with tech 9 times out of 10. Um, so I tend to not worry about those too much. Um, but yeah, sometimes, um, if it's just convenient, or if there is like a small jump or something, then yeah, I will have like a double respawn. As you say, just to the side of the road. There's a very good custom block set, which is basically a quarter of the size of a typical platform block. So 500, 500, yeah, 500 centimeter, I think,
Mm-hmm.
a 500 centimeter block, and they're quite good because it doesn't look like I've just slapped a massive block, and yeah, it's very out of the way, very discreet. So I'd recommend using those when doing like double respawns, but at least as yeah, I think at least with tech, it's not something you need to worry about too much.
Yeah, I think pretty much the only times I include it, like you said, if there's a jump or a speed check, or also if the checkpoint is at the bottom of a hill or something, so
Yeah,
you aren't
that's
just
true.
going
Yeah,
up the hill at like 5 miles an hour just in tears or something. But
yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, so I think outside of that, it's definitely not a style. And plus, honestly, a couple drifts later, you're back up to the speed that you would have had if you hadn't crashed or double
yeah,
respawned or whatever. So it's not, typically it's not that big of a deal.
yeah.
So I mentioned before I drive quite a few like I newer player tech maps, or people who are new to tech. What have have you noticed anything in common with like these? I want to say bad, but that's like a subjective term, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, whatever. For lack of a better term, bad tech map or something.
Hmm.
Like, what's I know we covered a lot. There might be some overlap with some stuff that we've already said, but what are some things that you notice from these quote unquote bad tech maps?
Yeah. So I suppose, um, yeah, I will kind of I think we've highlighted some of them already, but I'll kind of just go over them again, which is um in terms of it's another term which goes kind of thrown around all the time, which is kind of calculation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and typically bad, quote unquote bad maps is usually in the same party with bad calculation.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of what that means for tech itself, um, that could mean one of a few things. So firstly, it could be that again you gear up from, let's say you're doing like some speed tech or something, which is basically tech, but usually gear five, gear four,
Mm-hmm.
five instead of 4, 3. Um, let's say you're building the start, and then you you would have the drift entry right on the gear. So you drift through in like you're slowing down by drifting, but you're gearing up. It's like, ew, it's really strange. Um,
It doesn't
so
feel
it doesn't
great.
feel. No. So that's kind of one aspect I would say is kind of bad calculation. I would say. Another aspect could be um even with actually now I think about it, like sausage tech. So a sausage tech is much harder to map because you have all of the elevation you have to kind of work out with your brain.
Mm-hmm.
But a case of bad calculation could be like you you enter the corner and the ideal curvature, the way that you'd want the kind of the parabola that you would want to take for the racing line
Mm-hmm.
results in you kind of just slightly jumping over, or you just fly out entirely out of the sausage. So you kind of have to like release on purpose to not get airtime. Like that's another example. A
Yeah.
bit much more specific with sausage tech, but here's still an example with like for instance, if you're using the bank to flat curve, like you have a bit of slight elevation there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's like another example. Um, and then yeah, another more common uh, quote unquote mistake, which I guess I see is again that kind of having the the same direction drift, so again left into left or right into right,
Mm-hmm.
straight after one another. So you end up drifting and then having to neo slide or release the steering. So um, it, more specifically, if there's not enough time to make that adjustment to
Yeah.
therefore make the next corner clean. If there isn't that sufficient time, then that's a bit of a mistake in terms of the calculation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess one other thing which I could say is um, it's nowhere near as critical, I would say, um, but it's in terms of like the I guess how do you say um it was on my mind. I had it, but
Oh
I'll try to
no.
think of it again.
Okay.
But I think I think it was to do with like um the I think it was to do with like the proof. Oh, that's right. Yes, it's it's nothing bad. It's generally not bad. Sometimes I see the same or the same profile of corner being reproduced through the track.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not a mistake, but to make your track stand out, because again, you only have in a typical track between 30 seconds and 60 seconds, typically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you really want your track to really stand out, to make it more enjoyable, um, it's at least for me, it's quite important to add as much diversity as possible to the track, whether that's elevation, whether that's the quarter profiles themselves, or whatever it may be. Um, if you have the same sort of blocks being used, or this, you know, similar corner profiles, so you know, like a flat gear five drift into flat gear five drift to flat gear five drift over and over again. That's not going to be as interesting to play as you know maybe a banked gear five into like an uphill downshift into gear four. There's so much more to do in the latter. So um, again, it's not a mistake at all. Um, but instead, a promotion or a piece of advice to make your tracks better, I would say, or more eye catching to the general audience is um, you know, don't be scared of being creative. Try to think of new things, um, and try to avoid reproducing the same idea throughout the track because it can get boring sometimes.
Yeah, I really like that point because I think when you're playing a map, it's also much easier to learn and remember if every single corner is at least slightly different. Then,
Mm,
because then you're
yeah.
like, oh yeah, so this comes after this. Oh, this is the big hairpin drift. So after this, I need to. Yeah, it's like versus everything. It's like, wait, does this come up after the third or fourth time I take this
Mhm.
similar
Yeah,
journey?
yeah,
It's like it just helps a lot with, I think, just general learning and memorization too, which is very nice. It's not a great feeling to keep getting lost on a map
yeah, for
and then
sure.
you like guess wrong or something and you're like, darn it.
Yeah. I think also, on the similar sort of line as that is if so you let's say you go on the Track of the Day server and you know, it's 7 o'clock CET, you know, a new track comes in, what we got today.
Mhm.
Um, and it always, you know, it gives you that sort of flying bird's eye view, you know,
Mhm.
before you play the track. If I look from a bird's eye view or plan view and I just see, you know, the route just going from one end to the other end of the stadium, and it's just right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, finish. I'm not going to be as captivated as a map such as that in comparison to which is again something which I'm trying to include much more is you know okay maybe we do a couple 180s or 180-degree corners.
Mhm.
Then maybe let's do like a much longer drift, or maybe we use a little bit more so it kind of twists and turns into itself or around itself. 'Cause for me, that gives it a much more like it looks much more dynamic rather than just having the track just go right, left, right, left, right, left. If you know what I mean?
Yeah, that variety and stuff and all the turns and elements.
Mm,
'Cause I mean that pretty much goes for everything, you know? It's like you gotta, a building is gonna look a lot more exciting if it's got, like these small crevices or spaces versus just like a flat wall, or,
yeah.
even like a meal or something is gonna look a bit more appetizing if you've got like a bunch of different textures and colors and stuff versus
Mhm.
like what the when you think of like the typical plain bland prison meal or something you see in TV shows, it's always just like what, this beige just slop or something that they smack onto the plate, you
Yeah,
know.
I get you, 100%.
Yeah, yeah, so that variety I think is really important, just helping a map stand out with everything. um I think for me, one thing I've noticed, especially with my own tech maps, as I've gotten better, I've also, I guess, learned how to define the apex of a drift a lot more clearly.
Mhm.
Because when we think about a typical drift, is so you're approaching on the outside, and then you drift, and the apex is kind of like that point on the inside that you try to get as close as possible to, and
Yeah.
then you go back on the outside.
Mhm.
And for me, not every single drift is going to have a clearly defined apex, and that's perfectly fine. But if you're building a tech map and you notice that most of the drifts maybe don't have a clearly defined apex, at least in my experience, it can, like, the map itself can start to feel like a bit awkward, like you're not really sure how to take any of these drifts, and the more you drive it, the more unsure you become, like, am I supposed to push here, or where there's nowhere to push to, so how do I, yeah, it's just like it kind of feeds into that uncertainty, I guess,
Mhm.
if
Yeah.
if a lot of drifts end up not having the apex. 'Cause-
Yeah, yeah, and I think, with that, I try to it's also why I try to stay away from using platform when it's flat,
mhm.
because especially for Cam 3 players, it's much more difficult to see, like a reference for the apex. So, whereas with road, it's quite clear. It's like, okay, that is the limit of the track.
Mhm.
Okay, that you know, or I need to, as you say, go, full outside, kiss the apex, outside. So then
Mm-hmm.
I can see that I've maximized the corner. I've done everything that I can to preserve as much speed as possible. Whereas if you have like a track which is, really wide, massive platform, and you have a corner which you drift through, it's much harder to kind of go. Is like, am I pushing, or is that right? Or it doesn't. It also doesn't feel as rewarding.
Yeah.
I can assure you that majority of players in who have played Trackmania, whether that's you know experienced or completely new, if they've that kind of sound of literally yourself when you push the wall and it's like so pixels away or just yeah, so good.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you're not going to have that when mapping with plastic. Sorry, with platform,
Yeah, and
because there's nothing to reference to, or refer to. Sorry.
yeah, and with my map review streams and stuff, oftentimes like I'll point something out and be like, this corner like feels weird. Here are a couple of reasons why I think so. And the person will be in chat and they'll respond, they'll be like, I knew it, or something, or like, I wasn't very
Yeah.
happy with that turn. And in that, like, I think even if you are new to Trackmania or you don't feel like you're very skilled or whatever, like there is still a gut feeling that most people have. So if you're building something and a turn doesn't feel quite right, even if you can't place why that turn doesn't feel right, like 9 times out of 10, honestly, like someone else will point it out, be like, yeah, that turn feels bad. And then so
Mm,
I think most players they need to give themselves more credit than
yeah.
they give themselves in terms of being able to identify, because like, yeah, even if you can't say why, that just listen to yourself and work on it until you're happy with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oftentimes, like in that process of working on it until you're happy with it, you will spot like, oh, maybe it's because of this, and then you'll try it, and then it'll work, and it'll be a lot better, and you'll be like, wow, okay, I learned something new today.
Mhm.
So
I
yeah,
think,
mm-hmm.
sorry.
Oh no, I was wrapping up my thought. Go for it.
Alright. I think a piece of advice to identifying, like, if you're not sure if, if a corner is like, if you generally don't have a gut feeling, if you're not too sure, um, I would recommend, again, this is why Trackmania 2020 mapping is so good, is the flying respawns, you know, is play play that sector or play that corner and or even just test validate your track. And if you're finding that, you're failing in the same place or you having to keep respawn in the same place to get a certain line, there's a good chance that there is an outlier that you've spotted, not because think of it as like an algorithm. You're kind of narrowing down, like, okay, that that corner's fine, that corner's fine, and I'm having more iterations in that sector of the track. There's got to be something there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite a good way that I try and identify if a corner needs adjusting. Is how many times do I need to retry that specific corner to get it to work? Because if I keep respawning, I'm like, it just need a little more. There's a good
Mm-hmm.
chance that someone else will too.
Yeah, and I think tech definitely more than other styles. I think it's the type I'll start building and I'll be like, yeah, this is great. And then I'll leave the map for a couple days just to refresh my mind on it. And I'll come back to it and I'll be like, okay, this one turn, I'll adjust this one turn. And that turn happens beginning to be in the beginning of the map. And since I adjusted that turn, now all the other turns feel off and I have to go back
Yeah.
through. I yeah, that that happens a lot with I more so with than other styles. I think that happens with tech. a lot,
Mm,
just because
yeah.
it is so finicky as far as like the perfect line and stuff. And I guess
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
since it is so popular, people know what they want. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think tech and
yeah.
full speed are probably the two two people are the pickiest about.
Yeah, I think just to touch on that, I think it's, like, the one of the main things I guess is, um yeah, I've had it a few times where I've not been quite convinced of a start and I've had to kind of scrap it and, that sort of thing, and rebuild and try and make it work. But the thing with I think the reason why tech is much harder to, um so let's say you're in that scenario where you're like, "I'm not convinced. I'm gonna have to create a new track, or create a new start and join it back."
Mm-hmm.
It tech is very entry dependent, or more so than other styles, I would say.
Yeah.
Like comparing like grass or plastic, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's difficult to find the right speed and also find the right entry to reconnect the new start with the old track.
Yeah, because any little difference in speed, and you're not if you build a new start, you're probably not coming out with the same exact speed as the previous one, and that can help throw things off as well.
Hmm. Yeah, because yeah, and let's say you 10 speed less, that's gonna impact your braking zone by X amount of meters.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in plastic, as just an example, or with grass or plastic, you just steer a bit more to scrub the speed,
Yeah.
or maybe like a tap release.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas yeah, with tech, like the entire point of reference changes completely.
Yeah, which also I think is why tech, because you can first put a drift in, and then as you drive the map more, just as you build it, you drive it, play test it, and as you get better and better at the map, you can realize that I might have missed the mark on this one turn, maybe.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's too, like, even if a turn feels really good at first, you might still have to adjust it later, just as the rest of the map shapes up, you get better at driving it, all that good stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
All right, and then last little bit is basically what are some words of advice, good practices to follow when someone is building a tech map? And what I mean by this is one of the first tech maps, well, the first serious tech map that I built, I got the words. Someone told me don't restrict the entry to a drift, restrict the exit. So if you have like poles or something in the road, don't put the poles when people are setting up their drift. Put them like after the apex or closer to the exit of the drift.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that helped quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one is yeah, being able to, I mean, well, I think for those using PC, um yeah, using the editor root plugins, so you can see this is related, which to my next point. So
Mhm.
so that you can see the trace of your car is really, really helpful. Not only in terms of creating transitions or anything like that, but also in terms of, again, if you were to let's say you have a route, like just an idea, I would then zoom out and kind of go, does it look like my car, or the line, the line itself, or the spline is going straight anywhere? If it does, then that looks like there's a break of flow in the track.
Oh, good point. Good point.
So I try to look at the spline and kind of go, okay, is the curve? Think of it as though you're like for people who use Photoshop or even just like a image editing software. Like you have a pen, you draw a line,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go to the next vertex, draw the line, and that produces a perfectly smooth parabola.
Mm-hmm.
If that spline in the game isn't a smooth curve in an ideal case, in a smooth curve, and if there's kind of straight lines where you're having to kind of wait for the corner,
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a break of flow there. Um, so that's one thing I would look out for is really use that the root plugin, editor root, I think it is. There's a couple others out there which are also really good. Um, and yeah, I think also with tech is yeah is it's I would agree with your point is it's it's best to leave the entry uh open so that players can see the apex because in general when you're driving you're looking ahead, you're looking at the next corner, you're looking at the next apex, so
Mm-hmm.
that the car will then go there if that makes sense.
Yeah.
um so you want to be looking at that apex, whilst before you've even started braking, you want to be looking at that apex. So if you have big pillars blocking the way, then that's not as ideal. It's better to have a pillar. If you are going to place a pillar, it's better to have a pillar either completely out the way, but more just kind of scenery, a bit of color balance also, or you have it kind of on the exits. Um, That's yeah. No matter what you do, any obstacles, try not to obscure the vision of the player. So you know this is also something I recommend doing when testing the maps. It's probably quite unintuitive, and will probably take quite a bit of learning. But try to play the map in every camera in one, two, and three. You don't have to do the alternate cameras because
Yeah. Who uses
but yeah,
those?
yeah. But yeah, one, two, one. Try and do one, two, and three, or one and three, or because that will give you the best um visualization of okay, and that's a little blind. Maybe I need a pot like a tiny like light pole or flag right on the apex to help give that visualization, so
Mm-hmm.
that players have something to aim for rather than just kind of guessing to an extent.
Yeah, I've definitely had maps that I build them and I think they're great. And then it becomes track of the day and all of a sudden people are angry. Like this is literally undrivable in Cam 2.
Mm.
I'm like, oops. I don't
But
know. I don't play that
it
game.
happens. It happens. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's something that I'll mention just quickly is the it happens all the time. I that sort of you know that sort of tunnel vision
Mm-hmm.
where it happens all the time. I mapped for the 2023 World Tour circuit, and I created the World Championship map for Valley, and
Oh, okay. That's cool. That's cool.
and I had this. It was kind of in the middle of the map. I did basically a massive jump through the valley. Ironically,
Mm-hmm.
um, onto some grass. And I was like, yeah, this is how you drive it, and that's how I drove it every single time in the either when I was testing or validating because I knew that was how it's done. And I think 10 minutes 15 minutes. I remember I was watching all the discoveries and people were discovering the map. And then I saw, yeah, literally within 10 minutes or so, people just started bug sliding it. I was like, I can't believe I didn't see that.
I
But
remember that too.
yeah, but and fortunately it was fixed. But point being is, yeah, it happens all the time. So, don't I don't think it just happens to you, it happens to everyone. Some of the best and some of the worst, it happens to everyone. So, don't get downed if you miss something or, because it's gonna happen to everyone, and that's how you learn, most importantly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the better you get, the less it happens, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
never stops happening.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I mean, to be fair, for your Valley map, I think a lot of people thought that the bug slide line was really cool. So,
I think
but
some did, some didn't.
yeah, but
It was quite
maybe
mixed,
not
yeah.
the most consistent or what you
Yeah.
what you look for in a competitive map. But it happens. But
It was yeah, it was truly something.
yeah, you mentioned for a second earlier about like building on PC specific. I
Yeah.
think you're talking about like a couple plugins. But I also that did remind me. I did want to mention that I think tech is actually a really console friendly style to
Yeah.
map as well. Just because I think like with the road pieces and stuff, for speed tech, I think it starts. You might start looking at custom pieces a lot more. So maybe not speed tech is the most console friendly, just because of the higher speed. Sometimes you want a bit more room or something, or a 3 block flat to banked instead of just the typical 2 or 1 block. But if you stick with that Gear 4 tech or something, I think it is very console friendly. Because I know
Mhm.
the console editor is not, uh, we'll say the most detailed
Yeah.
editor in existence. And I know for a lot of these builders on console, there's quite a few styles that I don't know how you would build a full speed map on console with no custom cam
Yeah.
changes. Like that sounds brutal. Or
Yeah. Yeah.
I think bobsled is another one that would be really hard on console just because like the bob selection is so limited. But
Yeah.
tech I actually think is really a good option because I don't know if it's just yeah, whenever a tech map relies very heavily on custom pieces, I notice that the difficulty of it spikes a lot. And I don't know if it's just because we're all the blocks that we're most used to in the game are the base vanilla blocks, and technical is I mean, well, tech is so technical. So if something is a little off, you're going to feel it and it's going to feel weird. So I don't know if it's just because like, oh, the vanilla blocks are what we're all used to, so it's just easier, or if it's
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
something else. But yeah, I don't really like using custom blocks when I'm building tech. It just feels
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I try to be honest, I try to um withhold from using many custom blocks in any style. Because for me, that if you're able to create something using vanilla, for me that goes that's impressive
Mm-hmm.
because you're not relying on something else. You're not relying on the perfect thing. Instead you're able to kind of go, okay, I need a bit more of this or whatever. So like previously, I had the idea of like you know, I think it was like some sort of plastic bounce into ice or something. But yeah, it's then a case of I want to try and not use custom items for the actual ice corn itself. I want to try new things. It's very difficult now because there's so many maps out there now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's something that I would try and recommend is try not to go berserk on custom items because sometimes that for me kind of just shows a bit of quote unquote laziness. I don't know if that's the right word. It's
Yeah,
kind of like you could do so much. so much with so many of these blocks. So go for it, you know, go for it.
Yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about. I know in one of the mapping discords that I'm in, one of the kind of a common, maybe not too common, but something that's popped up more in maybe the past year or so is a critique of way too many transition spam,
Hmm.
which is well, it's one of the largest custom item set, way too many transitions. And to use those blocks is perfectly fine, but you can definitely tell when someone just uses them for every single corner,
Mm.
and it's just it makes things like too smooth, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like some of the, like, I don't know, skill expression, bite, yeah, maybe some stuff that makes it interesting is just gone, and every single corner is just extreme flow, and I don't know, it loses something, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. And and again, like if I mean, I've seen some wild maps on well since I've started mapping.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I'm gonna let you into a little secret here. I
Oh
really
boy.
got in. It's probably not even a secret to be honest, but it's just a bit of backstory really. But I really got interested in mapping when I so in Nations Forever when I used to play that. I used to play on a full speed server, but I didn't hurt. I was just a kid. I wasn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
But a mapper who sometimes, I mean, I'd imagine he still maps now, but he's not very active. But he still does. Is Simo 900.
Okay.
Um, and he mapped some crazy transitional full speed maps in Nations Forever. And again, everything in that there were no customizing in that game. Everything was
Mm-hmm.
vanilla, and it was just so impressive. You can make the car do this, and yeah, it was just mind boggling. So and I've then taken that, and I'm currently building a press forward track, with my goal of trying to not use as many customizers, trying to keep it as vanilla as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, if I can make the car do this just using vanilla, it's like for me that's more satisfying because it's like, oh, the coincidence of that is incredible. Versus doing, oh, I'll just use custom block because
Yeah, and I
or it's
think,
just you know what I mean, you know?
yeah, and I think it's a pretty common saying that, I really like when people ask me why I don't use more custom items, even for scenery or something, is that restriction breeds creativity. And
Yeah.
I think that's just like, that's kind of it. It's just, yeah, if you can work within these confines, sometimes you have to come up with more creative solutions to get where you want. But in the end, like
Mm.
it turns out cooler than if you just grab something that fit perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. But with that, do you have anything that you want to add before we look to maybe wrap up our
Mhm.
our talk about our tech talk? Yes. It's not a TED talk, it's a tech talk. There we go.
I would say not necessarily linked to tech, but with just general mapping is I'm a strong advocate for being different and you know don't be afraid to just go for it. Let your imagination come up with things.
Mhm.
And try not to let the critiques of others hinder your passion. Um, and yeah, I'm an advocate for that sort of thing. So, I enjoy thinking, or what shouldn't work. Let's try it. So yeah, try things. That's the glory of this game. The editor, it's almost limitless what you can do in the game and what you can create. So And if it doesn't work, that's fine. Learn from it and keep going, keep at it. Um, you know, that's how I've gotten to the stage I'm at the moment, and I will continue to do so. I'll continue trying to push for new things and create new things because yeah, I think it's important for the game and important for the players to keep them hooked and to see what Trackmania is about. So, yeah, don't be afraid to let loose. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point because it's very easy to maybe look at someone else or uh what they've done and to just think that like like all or like you get discouraged or something like that. Like I every once in a while I'll have someone uh submit one of their maps and then they'll put like a little note or a little note next to it, just be like, sorry, I only map lol, like this is my first attempt at a serious map or whatever. And granted, it's not like it's not the most competitive map in the world, but there is something fun to it, before someone
Mhm.
gets like bogged down by the meta of mapping or something. There is just like a core gameplay of like it might not be the most polished map in the world, but it is fun.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that I think people get a little too wrapped into creating like the perfectly calculated map. Everything's perfect. They can have no rough edges. Yeah, it's got to be the most amount of people possible have to like this map because it's a little cliche, but like the more people that you try to get to like the map, sometimes you can get to a point where the less people will like love the map.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think there is definitely something fun about just playing someone's first map and just seeing what on earth they've come up with.
Yeah. I remember as a I don't know what it was. It was some time ago, but I think it was sort of big ago, and I was watching Spam's stream. It's one of his highlighted clips, I think it is. But anyway, and he was playing a bobsleigh map by Buckley Pants. I'm pretty sure it was,
Oh no.
and it was just it, as- yeah, but it doesn't matter because if Buckley Pants enjoys it, that's all that matters. Because you know I try to remind myself this, which is, I'm creating for myself. Obviously,
Mhm.
if I'm creating for a competition, then I do try and see it from everyone's perspective. But ultimately, I'm doing it because I enjoy it. I'm in, I'm I I continue to do projects. I continue to to map competitive maps for competitions, and I continue to do a ridiculous map of scenery on a press forward map, which will probably hopefully get finished. But
I
I
hate
just
scenery.
oh my word, it's gonna take some time. But I do all that because yeah, I enjoy it. So yeah, I do all these things because yeah, I enjoy to that's why I enjoy that. I enjoy the creativity. So I will continue to be creative.
Yeah, that's really, and that's also why I don't really like I say I hate scenery and stuff, but like I have done the scenery for 99% of my maps just because like I at the end of the day, even though I don't particularly enjoy building scenery, I'm going to be a lot happier like looking back at the map and being like, you know what, even though I didn't enjoy it, I did it. And
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
and that's also honestly something I might see from newer mappers too, is they'll immediately look to collab with people so they don't have to do the thing that they like maybe they feel like is their weakest point or something. They look to avoid it, and
Mhm.
it's just like, nah, embrace it. Like it, especially if you're new, this is the time to be bad at it,
Mhm. Mhm.
you got to get through it. And I think that's
Yeah. Yeah.
just like don't worry about it. You like you said, just build something that makes you happy, that you can look back on and being like, yeah, this is cool. I made it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think another highlight, which I think is she's a really good um example for uh a really good example for the community is Mudgy. So she's
Mm-hmm.
uh, as we speak, she's hosting the Mudgy Mondays, and um I mean competitively the maps are a doodle. Woo! But um she's having a ball. She's loving her time, and yeah, I see that. I'm like, fair enough. That's the main thing, really,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore, yeah, um she's making a ton of other people happy because she's enjoying her time, and so yeah. Again, try not to think about what anyone else says. If you enjoy it, then yeah, who can argue with you?
Yeah, and I think it's actually really interesting that for the longest time, Cup of the Day was like the singular like big Trackmania. I say like competition. I mean, yeah, it's like Cup of the Day. It's the big thing. But I've noticed lately, especially in the past year, we've had lots of other events pop up with stuff like Bonk Cup or like Grenadi's Big Yak kind of cup and that stuff where and even weekly shorts where
Mm, mhm.
it's like the maps are they're designed not to be well, I don't want to say not to be good, but like not to be perfect or
Yeah.
anything, where it's like the roughness of the map is the appeal. And I think it's really interesting how the culture is kind of shifted to where a lot of people now say that like Cup of the Day or Track of the Day maps are boring. And now
Hmm.
we're kind of
Hmm.
shifting over to more unpolished. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's
Um.
like that's really interesting how the culture is kind of shifting.
Yeah. I mean, I think even for myself, I mean, excuse me. I mean, I enjoy smooth maps, but I will. Yeah, I've kind of made that shift where I enjoy sort of the awkwardness of I enjoy the challenge of trying to excuse me, almost trying to tame a track, if that makes sense. So
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, trying to trying to neo slide in the right place, or being challenged with I don't know, a water super reactor up. So I don't know, but that's the challenge.
mm-hmm.
You know, you don't get to play that in Cup of the Day, and
Mm-mm.
there's a good reason why not. I think it's fair enough.
Well, I mean, I've tried,
But
but Nadeo said no.
I mean, I would happily play that, to be fair. But it's that challenge where, and again, when you talk about Bonk Cup, it's like, again, I was watching Virtual's latest video. He did the Bonk Cup, and it's like, you know, eh, trying to like the royal plastic blocks. You know, I'm really trying to innovate with those as well,
mm-hmm.
because I think those are brilliant little blocks. And yeah, there's such a skill set, I think, which is missing from Cup of the Day, which is car control. Being able to trust the car, which I'm still trying to learn. Like I'm not good at that,
Mm-hmm.
but that's part of the challenge. Which I'm and or pipes. Oh my word, I'm terrible at pipes. But I would love to learn. I would love to improve on them. So, I don't know, maybe I'll have to try and get a piped track of the day, or I don't know. But yeah, kind of a bit of rambling, but yeah, I think there is a shift, a slow shift with some of the player base kind of enjoying or searching for more roughness, as you say, which I think is quite a good way to describe it.
mm-hmm. I mean, it's interesting and it's fun sometimes to
Hmm.
just like say, screw it, I'm gonna go for it, and then you just see what
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, or and so that's another thing with, again, not tech related, sorry, but just in general with kind of awkward gears, especially on dirt or grass or plastic,
Hmm.
you know, having to control the car, having that challenge to find that best way to gear up to gain the most time, I think is a really cool concept, you know? Um, I'm not saying, you know, sh should try and to create a track and say, "Yeah, I'm just gonna place, or have the gear right there, right in the middle of it."
Uh-huh.
I'm not saying necessarily that, but if there's like, again, I was playing one of Mudgy's, maps from one of her qualifiers.
Hmm.
It was a pretty predominantly full dirt map. The gears were, not the best, I think it's fair to say. Not the most perfect, like, they didn't shift cleanly, or, you were gearing through the corner or stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, I find that quite interesting. I treat it as a new challenge, like, "Okay, do I release here to delay the gear, or do I wanna release the steering to get it?" There's more to think about rather than just drive, and it will just do the work for me.
Yeah, it's like another way for skill expression to come through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean I think that's like really cool and interesting to see like the wider community gravitate more towards those things lately. But
Mhm,
I think as far as our topic today goes, I think that's just about it, honestly. So I guess to go over, quick summarize or whatever, tech, Trackmania's maybe one of the most iconic styles, especially at this point.
mhm,
Trackmania has so many styles
yeah,
throughout. But yeah, tech definitely I think is the competitive style that has stood the test of time, which
mm,
is really cool. Uh but because of that, it's got like a long history. It's got kind of that rule set. If you are going to try to build a competitive polished tech map, it can be very tricky at first. But I think just going through not being afraid to test the corners and then change the corners if you aren't happy with
mhm,
something.
yeah,
I think that was a really good point. And then just making sure you're going from the outside to that apex to the outside again, and making sure that that exit leads you nicely to the next element. Uh,
yeah, for sure.
yeah, got to get that flow in there. And then if things are too difficult, uh, make sure things aren't too blind. Open up the track, give players a little bit more room to make those adjustments and fixes, and then hopefully that'll bring the difficulty back down. Because I will say, tech is just inherently one of the more difficult styles,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is why I think it's also been one of the more premier competitive styles, is just that difficulty alone.
Yeah, I would agree with that, yeah. There's even though it doesn't look like, if you were to look at the top players, they'll make it look effortless,
I'm
but
jealous.
there's but that's where the skill is, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So,
Mm-hmm.
there's a deceptively quite high skill ceiling, I think, with tech.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's not an easy style to drive at all. There's a lot of stuff to know and such, so
Yeah. And then, but honestly, the most important thing, just try, but don't like completely stress out about making everything absolutely perfect, because
mm,
there is no such thing. And at the end of the day, you just got to make yourself happy.
yeah.
If you're happy, then, you'll keep building more maps and you'll, continue to be happy. Ro-
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's what kept me going, so
Mhm.
Because again, to reiterate, I built the maps. Well, I remember actually building maps so that I could play by myself on those maps. I remember building like coast maps on the coast environment,
Mhm.
like the using the Formula sort of racetrack style blocks, and then playing party play, pretending that I'm colliding with myself. Glory days. But
Uh-huh,
again,
uh-huh.
it's it's that enjoyment factor. That's what kind of kept me going. So
Mhm. Yeah, and so I don't stress. Don't stress. It's been like even if you aren't 100% happy with where you're at right now, just don't worry about it too much. As long as you're having fun. That's the important thing. Is this this is a video game. It was made to have fun with. Don't go to bed crying or something. That would
yeah.
not be good. But with that, I think that's it. So, Wizzy, want to say thank
Hmm.
you. Thank you for joining me
Otherwise, thank you for having me.
on the first episode. Yeah, that's really cool. I definitely want to keep doing this with more people, but for now, where if you guys want to hear more from Wizzy, where can they find you?
So I think the most I usually post is on X, but I still call it Twitter.
Everyone
To be
still
honest,
calls it Twitter.
yeah, on Twitter, we'll go with that. Um, just RZL Wizzy, at RZL Wizzy, on Twitter. I usually post, if I do some races, I'll post results there, or like I'm hoping to, like for instance, if I make like a trailer for my PF map, which will hopefully get done by 2035, then that will go there.
Yeah, there you go.
um, yeah, so yeah, but that's it. So, thank you.
Yeah, do you got any maybe if people want to check out some of your maps, which do you have any maps in mind that
Sure.
you would want them to
Uh,
show? Or yeah.
sure, yeah. So it's a bit unfortunate because there's a few which I'm working on now, which I really want to show, but I can't. Yeah, it's always the way.
Mhm,
But they'll
mhm.
be really soon. They will be really soon. But there's I think one which I kind of took the next level with water. Like I tried to be more creative with water.
Okay.
Was a map called Drip Drop, which was part of the PASL or the Pan American Solo, something like that.
Okay.
Um, so that I really tried to push myself with water. So, and I also that was the map which I kind of found out about like I guess it's kind of been called like a water drift now. Um, so you kind of brake on purpose on water, drift to slow down and then take the corner.
Mhm.
Which I kind of found on Drip Drop, which is quite cool. Trademark. No, I'm
And
joking.
honestly, Drip Drop is a cool name for a track.
Thank you. So that's kind of one. Again, there's a couple which I'm releasing soon. Again, sorry, I can't say, but you'll see them.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm really happy with those. I will be streaming on Twitch, just WizzyTM. Sometimes just doing scenery, for my press forward map. So that's going to be really, really cool. It's a 20-minute press forward map.
Oh wow.
Uh, it's big. It's a
Yeah.
lot of scenery.
No kidding.
Oh my god. So I'll be streaming that when I can. So that's definitely going to be a highlight map when that's finished
Yeah,
by
I'd say.
2035.
like like
um,
you said 2035, right?
yeah, that's right. That's right. Let me see. Let me see. It's weird because yeah, there's a few maps which uh, there's a few maps which uh, yeah, I would say kind of like pushed me quite a bit. Especially one of the maps which is coming out soon, like that pushed me a lot
Oh,
because
wow.
it's so difficult to balance, everything. But it was enjoyable. I enjoyed that
Mm-hmm.
that challenge. Um, I would say another map which I'm pretty happy with is the so Spam posted something called the endurance race, and I created a track for that called Settlement.
Okay.
I was pretty happy with that. It was also the first time I tried more castle themed scenery, and I think it turned out quite nicely.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Um, there's one which was the I mapped for an ice competition, a mixed ice competition called Glacial, um, which that I think that was pretty nice. Um, but ooh, the other map, which I'll say one more. I'll say one more.
Okay. Okay. One
Um,
more.
one more. Yeah, the other map which I think I I pushed myself on was a map which it was a competitive map for a tournament called Holy Neil,
Mm-hmm.
uh, called Submerged, which, as the name implies, was style specific towards water, plastic, um,
Ooh, everyone's
and
favorite
NASCAR.
combo.
Everyone's favorite combo. So yeah, I think there's obviously aspects I would change now, but yeah, I was pretty happy with that as well. So it's hard to pick out a few to be honest, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would say keep an eye out on the future because there's a couple which I'm really looking forward to release.
Oh boy. Well, yeah, it definitely sounds like you've got a lot coming out. So will do. Definitely we'll keep an eye out for things. But for now, I think that's going to be it. I'll do my own self-advertising after this. I'm not going to make you sit there with my own self-advertising, but just want to say thank you again for sitting down. I know when I first messaged you, I said it would probably take about an hour. Um well, we're a little over that. So thank yeah, thanks for hanging in there.
That's right. It's yeah, really enjoyable to be here to be honest, and yeah, I hope you guys found it useful as well. That was kind of also the main thing. I'd like to um give help where I can when I have the time. So yeah, I hope you guys found it useful.
Yeah, people always say they like the longer form content. It's good stuff to build maps to, and so I hope that's what you've been doing for all the people listening. Building maps with this on in the background. There we go. All right, but yeah, for now, I think that's going to be it. Thank you, Whizzy, so much for joining me again, and hopefully I'll see all of you guys back here next time for the next episode. I already know what it's going to be about, but no spoilers, no spoilers. And now that it's later, I'm not holding Whizzy hostage anymore. I'm going to do a little bit of my own self advertising. But if you are still listening, this was my first time doing something like this, so let me know what you think. Anything you would change, maybe something you learned, all that good stuff. If you do want to see more Trackmania mapping content, it's pretty much all I do here, and I would appreciate a like and subscribe. I also stream on Twitch, where I host viewer map review. I like to discover the weekly shorts, and I also host a little tournament on your guys' maps. So if that stuff sounds like something you're interested in, go ahead and follow me on Twitch. And also, lately, I started another channel. It is Nolifus TV. Link will be in the description. And that's where I post all of my very slightly edited Twitch VODs. So if you want to see even more long form content and you can't make the streams, I'd recommend subbing there. And I think that's all the self advertising out of the way. One final thank you for Whizzy for sitting down and being able to talk about tech for almost 2 hours. Wow. And also a big thank you for you guys for also sitting there and being willing to listen to tech for about 2 hours. I really do appreciate it. But now, if you'll excuse me, it's time for me to get off the struggle bus and finally learn how to properly set up a drift. So yeah, just gonna open up the door. Wait, sorry, it's a little stuck. Wait, it's not opening. I mean that's okay. I can always hop out the window, but the windows aren't opening either. Oh, the emergency exits. They're closed. I can't open them. No, I can't leave the struggle bus. Why can't I leave?